Well, Chuck, it's been a long time since we've been able to really look into the latest things that are happening with regard to the coming of the Lord, the signs that are there.
I've been looking forward to this, Al, to just get together and
You bet.
exchange a few ideas. And this world is going so crazy. I'm anxious to get your perspectives too.
Well, you know what? I just see that everywhere I turn, and I know you've seen this too. People are scared.
Yes,
They
the
really-
apathy. The
yeah.
apathy seems to have turned to fear.
Yeah.
And that's scary in itself. Yeah.
A lot of people that know nothing about Bible prophecy, nevertheless, are talking about the fact that it seems like things are coming to some sort of a crescendo, some sort of an end.
And how, yeah. We see it in the young people too.
Yeah.
They have no sense of destiny.
That's right.
And and the more you watch what's going on, not only in Washington, but in Wall Street,
Yeah.
makes no sense.
Wow.
The more you know about that whole world, the more bizarre.
It is.
Yeah.
It is indeed. You know, I've just wondered from your perspective, what are 2 or 3 of the most important things that you've noticed that are fulfilling the signs that we've been looking at for so many years?
Well, as you've taught me from the beginning, you want to know what time it is, you look at Israel.
Always
And I
first.
have vivid memories as a child, a very young person, how people thought Hitler was the Antichrist, but there were 2 guys on the radio, H.A. Ironside and M.R.D. Hahn.
Yeah.
And they both made the point that Hitler could not be the Antichrist because Israel was not in the land.
So
And
right.
they were regarded as fringe freaks, sort of. Fundamentalists, they have this crazy, because everybody knew Israel was over because of 80-70 and all that.
Sure.
And on May 14th of 48, that debate should have ended.
Yes.
And but I remember that so vividly as an impressionable, I was very interested in the Bible, very young. But even in those days, I was very intrigued that here are a couple of guys that had the courage and the guts to insist upon the literal word. And they embarrassed themselves publicly by taking that position. And they were right, of course, because Israel was formed, like Isaiah said, in an hour. And so that's the fact that Israel's in the land. Today, we run the risk of taking that for granted.
Yeah.
We don't realize what an incredible milestone in human history that is. So that would be my first thought.
Yeah, you know, it's almost like I've called it a hinge of history. I talked about this with my dear friend Jack Kinsella, who died several months ago. But few people realize what an absolute colossal fulfillment of prophecy that really was. They need to get into reading Ezekiel chapter 34 through 39 to see just how great that it is.
Well, the other thing is, you asked for a couple.
Yeah, oh
The
yeah.
second one is a strange one. I get so tired of so many of these prophecy buffs pointing to the signs in Matthew 24, the wars and rumors of wars and so on and so on and so on, where Jesus says, but the end is not yet.
Right.
Which to me, he's saying, those are not signs. They'll come, but those are not signs. And I'm always amused by that. But in contrast to that, I have vivid memories up until maybe 10 years ago, where if you have a good Jewish friend that's going to Aliyah, go to Israel, if he's Jewish, no problem. If he's a Gentile, no problem. But if he's a Jew that believes in Jesus the Messiah, he is warned by his friends, keep it a secret. Don't get on any lists, because you'll be marginalized from the day you arrive. And that was sort of if you were a believer, a Jewish believer, you kept that to yourself privately. The thing that I've just recently become aware of is that today there are 350 Messianic fellowships in Israel.
Wow.
They're not large, but they apparently are openly able to pursue a belief in Yeshua as the Messiah and in their Jewishness. And I think that's fantastic. And to some extent, that's probably capped by the extreme ultra-Orthodox character. The most venerated ultra-Orthodox character in Israel's history was Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri, who died at a very age, and I'm even not sure how old he was, at least 108, maybe more. But they had over 250,000 people come to his funeral. Now understand, he was he wasn't just Orthodox, he was the ultra-Orthodox, but unquestionably the most venerated rabbi in Israel. But he left a sealed note with instructions not to have it open until 1 year after his death, which 1 year later, in 2007, I believe it was, in February, that on the front pages of Israel Today, they unravel that. And he had declared to his followers that he had met the Messiah. Wow. And that's a strange thing for him to do, but he did that. But then they opened up this note in which he declares, in effect, it's a little more complicated, but in effect, that the name of the Messiah, first of all, it's one Messiah, not two, and secondly, it is Yehoshua. Well, that bombshell drops right in the middle of the ultra-Orthodox community, and they don't know what to do with it because they got a problem. Because in Jewish etiquette, it's improper to speak evil of a guy that's been dead for a year. Yeah. And he took advantage of that by not declaring that event, have it declared 1 year after his death. So today, and there's been a book written by Carl Gallups on this very subject, but the rabbi that discovered the Messiah. But the point is, with those kinds of things happening, what I'm perceiving here, both by the prevalent messianic groups, but also because of things like Kaduri, that the blindness is beginning to lift. And that was what Paul tells us in Romans 11:25, that Israel's blinded until the fullness of the Gentiles become in. And I've always taken that as an idiom for the church, not to be confused with the times of the Gentiles, Nebuchadnezzar the Antichrist. No, the fullness of the Gentiles. Well, if the fullness of the Gentiles, when it's complete, I always visualize the Father saying to the Son, go get them. Yeah. That's the other thing, Hal, that I just, in this last year or so, have been having difficulty in grasping, is that Jesus, the Son of God, has yearnings. I find it hard to come, he's Son of God, he can do anything. I mean, he's all powerful, he's all this, he's everything. I found it very difficult to come to grips with the fact that he has yearnings. And it shows up in John 17, of course, where his yearning is to have us with him. And that's easy to say in words, but it's hard to really embrace that he has yearnings, and what a yearning to have. But those are two things anyway. You asked for two signs, and they're both Israel intensive. I'll throw another thing on the table, which isn't really a sign. In fact, it may be more useful to an audience than a sign, because there's a sign that isn't showing yet. Yeah. I'm so taken by the experience I had with the May 14th, 48 event, because it was announced and it became reality. The thing that I'm looking for, and I realize there are good scholars that don't agree with me, but I believe that Babylon, the city of Babylon on the banks of the Euphrates, has to reemerge in world history to be a major influence in order to receive the judgment that Isaiah 13 and 14 and Jeremiah 15:51 detail. In fact, both Isaiah and Jeremiah use the metaphor that it'll be destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah, which means it was sudden, it was permanent, it was complete, and never again inhabited. And they emphasize those very things. And I find that provocative because as you study the history of Babylon, it's never had that. In fact, I've got some of the bricks of the rebuild in my office. Yeah. The building materials have been reused, which means the judgment that Isaiah and Jeremiah talk about hasn't happened yet. Yeah. So what I suspect is that somewhere along the way, there's going to be an emergence in the news that and one version of it might be, I'm just speculating, that the UN may move there. The UN has to get out of New York, they tell me, because they're out of space and New Yorkers want them out. And there are discussions already that they need more space and it's not available there, they've got to move. And when you start wrestling with that, where would they move? They're not going to move to Paris, Rome, or London because they're the competitors in a sense. And so one of the suggestions, if you start dealing with that question, where would you move the UN if you were going to relocate it? You'd ask yourself, okay, what is the biggest challenge on the planet Earth over the next 5 decades? And the answer is energy. So why not plant the UN right in the middle of the oil patch? And so the possibility that it might be relocated to Babylon I understand there have been some Beltway white papers exploring it a little bit, but no one serious, no one influential. But somewhere along the way, it's my suspicion that that'll pop up in the news. It won't be a sudden thing. It's a thing that will be talked about, argued about, and it'll take time for it to occur, time for it to be relevant. So those are not things that will happen in 30 days. Those are things that take some time. But again, I see that as a prerequisite to Armageddon, to the real wrap-up where Jesus returns. So the other thing that leads me to, in my own perception, to recognize is the harpazo, the rapture. The distance between it and the second coming may be substantial. Could be several decades. I personally suspect it can't be more than 38 years. But the point is, when we make our little charts, we often jump to conclusions. I think the harpazo is very close. The second coming, I see it. It's going to. I visualize at least a decade or two away, and so. But I mention that as a sign, not as one that's happened, but it's a litmus test we can put out as just a test to see if we're tracking, if we really do take the text literally. So those are three things.
Well, I'll tell you something. I've always believed that somehow Babylon, the ancient city of Babylon, would be rebuilt.
Oh, so see now my favorite.
agree.
Where two people agree, one is redundant.
Well, it's nice to be redundant. But you know something, I feel that that the rapture, the taking away of the church, would almost have to happen before Babylon would be rebuilt.
Probably so. And there's a lot of reasons.
And I agree with you that there may be some undisclosed time lapse between harpazo,
We're together.
I've always call it the snatching out.
The great
believers.
snatch, I think, was your title.
That's right. I think that I've always said that people kind of automatically think the 7-year tribulation begins immediately with the snatching out of the believers.
Yeah, I know.
So there has to be some sort of a lag there, because the Antichrist cannot come until after the rapture.
There we go. We agree. From 2 Thessalonians 2.
That's right.
You have to. He can't.
You have to have a gap.
Yeah, he can't be revealed until his harpazo. So he has to be revealed, come to power, and power enough to enforce the covenant.
Exactly.
That could be an hour, or it could be many, many years. We
That's
don't know.
right.
Yeah. So we agree there. That's. But I remember your great snatch in your book. You know, it must be interesting for you. That book, Late Great Planet Earth, was translated in how many languages? 35 languages or something?
54.
54 languages.
That's that we know of.
Well, it's
There was pirated editions, and
I'm
happy they were pirated.
I don't think you can go to a corner anywhere on the planet Earth and not run into someone whose life was changed and impacted by that incredible book. And that's yet to be equaled. Nothing's had that impact, but it's exciting to be able to reconnect with you. By the way,
Oh, it is.
because
it's been a long time, Chuck.
yeah, it's.
And I'm sure glad to reconnect with you.
Well, this is strange because both our travels we haven't crossed for a while, so it's absolutely bizarre to me as just an observer, because I'm based more and more in New Zealand lately, so I have the privilege of seeing things from the sidelines, sort of. But and I run into in fact, one other aspect about this, I run into other internationally traded old friends that are executives that we typically will meet in one of the international lounges. We'll be going to different places,
Wow.
but we'll overlap.
Wow.
And they all say the same thing. It's an interesting observation. They say when they are in Europe or in Asia, they look at what's happening not just in Washington but in Wall Street with absolute bewilderment. It's insanity. The moves that are going on make no sense. When they are in the United States, they don't see it. He says when you're in the United States and you look around, everybody's running around with business as usual. Oh yes, we've got some problems, but they sort of presume they're going to work out.
Yeah.
They haven't done the math. They haven't any grasp of how serious the predicament is, and that the U.S. has really already plunged into a police state. And what's so bizarre is it's more obvious when you're outside the country watching as when you're in the country. And that's a strange aspect. But that leads to this whole mystery of Obama. Here's a guy about whom we know nothing. Don't know any grade he got in any of his courses. We haven't met anyone that knew him when he was in college, no gal that dated him. And here's a guy, and he's never had a job, never had an achievement, and he now is in the most powerful chair on the planet Earth. You know, there's a sobering perception we need to make to realize, especially the re-election, that was a conspiracy. You know, you speak of the media being biased. That's anybody in public life has known that for decades. This goes beyond that.
Oh yeah.
The collusion that was required by the mainline media to hide the truth about this guy from the voting electorate should be a treasonous offense.
Well, it should be. I've never seen anyone ever get even near the president's chair with people knowing absolutely nothing concrete about his past. I obviously have no. I don't see him as the Antichrist. I don't think he's bright enough. I don't think. But I love what Ann Coulter calls him, the Manchurian teleprompter. That's funny.
But I'm really anxious because I've shot my mouth off to our little audiences, whatever, about this. But I'm just curious, what's your perception of what's going to happen in the U.S., in Washington? What's your gut feel from your own perspective?
Well, you know, with grief, for over 50 years, I've said, as I look at Bible prophecy, there is no place in the prophecies regarding the very last days that lead up to the return of Christ. There's no place there for a power anything like the United States. And however, there are definite, spelled out definitions of what the leader of the West is going to be. It's going to be a revived Roman Empire, revived out of the ruins of the old Roman culture and people. And so, for that reason, I've said, I believe the United States has to fade from power. Somehow it would have to be destroyed, in maybe not totally, but taken from a place where they're a leading power. And and I think we're seeing it right now.
Well, that leads to a couple other things. You know, for years, several decades, when I travel, we usually have a talk on whatever, but we always close with a Q&A open. I always love to question answer the whole audience.
Sure.
And when we did that, we could always predict there were two questions that would always sooner come up.
Always.
One is, where's the United States in prophecy?
Yeah.
And we had a response to that. And why hasn't God judged America? Quoting Billy Graham. You'll have to apologize, Sodom and Gomorrah and all of that. Great soundbite by Billy. But the point is, for years, I've always responded to those questions by leaning on Genesis 12, verse 2 and 3. That is, because of our support of Israel's right to exist, that was a shield protecting us from an overdue judgment. And I used to use that as my escape in that Q&A environment. Well, interesting, I don't get any questions like that anymore.
Yeah, there's no more
support
for
don't
Israel.
ask about it. Yeah, they don't ask about it. But the other thing is, people say, aren't you concerned, aren't you, with the Middle East is such a cauldron, aren't you worried about Israel? And I have to admit, no, I don't. I pray for them because I'm told to.
Sure.
But I don't worry about her because her future is in God's hands. I do now worry about America because for the first time in my intellectual history, for the first time in our history, we have turned against Israel as support.
Amen.
And
we have.
And that means, people say, do you think the wrath of God has already started? Yes, I do, for a number of reasons. The abandonment wrath, that's exactly what did to the northern kingdom. He just let the Assyrians come in and remove them from history. The other rumble that I still don't have a good answer to is Ezekiel 39, verse 6, where we discover that the Magog invasion is Magog on their allies trying to invade Israel, but they have hailstones of fire falling on Magog and on a third party. There's a party mentioned that's not part of Magog, and it's not visible in any other allusion except in verse 6. Hailstones of fire upon Magog and upon them who dwell securely in the isles or coastlands.
Mm-hmm.
Who are they? They're unidentified.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to a conjecture. Could it be that there's been some saber rattling, that with Magog coming in, that the United States or somebody does something stupid, that it results in an exchange? And it's our nukes that are so visible in Chapter 39 being cleaned up. But conversely, it also precipitates an overruled judgment the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a hint. But I haven't found anyone really illuminate for me what Ezekiel 39:6, who it alludes to. Because it's not Magog exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a third party that somehow in the margins that's getting also caught.
Oh yeah, and I've seen that allusion before, where it speaks about those who dwell in the coastlands.
Yes.
And in Bible history time, they weren't aware of continents, but they were aware of great peoples that were with shorelines. And so today we would say those who dwell in the continents.
Yeah, and
who are living. Not all of them is specified. They're the ones that are living in a false peace and a false sense of security.
Yeah, the Batosh term is a false confidence. Yeah. It says securely in the King James, but the word really means false confidence. But yeah, that's another thing that haunts me if it's just unresolved.
Well, that's a good thing to be haunted about, because there's a very good chance that means us somewhere in line.
That's why I couldn't resist when you called me a few months ago. You called me on the phone and said, "Chuck, why New Zealand?" And I couldn't resist pulling your leg a little bit. I says, "Well, you know what? A number one threat is an electromagnetic pulse, and the only defense you're having is to change hemispheres."
Yeah.
And there's a long pause on the phone until I added, and also nuclear. All the nuclear combatants, China, Russia, Europe, U.S. are all in the northern hemisphere. So it's time for you to come down and join us in New Zealand and get away from all that. I was pulling your leg, but that's not why we're down in New Zealand. But it's I use that to disturb people because it's kind of fun. But it's a strange time, and one of the things that we wrestle with is how do we preach, minister to the young people? As we look at facts and we try to get a perspective that we are moving into the end times. How do we give the young people a sense of destiny? How do we give them a feeling of, because as we probe young people, as we encounter, they don't have any foundation of optimism, and it's a hard thing to deal with.
Well, I'm going to pick up on something and this is bothering a lot of young people today. You mentioned EMP, electromagnetic pulse, caused by a crude. It just has to be a very elementary, crude nuclear device. And I think that unless something is done with, say, a rogue power like Iran, there are rogue powers like Pakistan who have nuclear weapons already.
There is a black market in nukes, yeah.
But this is the first time that a nation has sworn openly that they're going to destroy both Israel and the great Satan, the United States.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so I feel that we're facing something right now that today is November the 3rd, and just this last week it was pronounced by the defense minister of Israel that they have evidence from admissions, even by the leaders in Iran, that they're within about 3 or 4 weeks of being able to produce an atomic bomb, a crude bomb. That's all they need. They could go with a tramp steamer 200 miles off the coast of the United States. They've already got missiles that can easily fling that to an altitude of 200 miles up, and that's more than what they need. They could fire one of those over the center part of the United States and knock out the whole electronic grid, at least for the East Coast, maybe the whole.
About 70% of the capacity. If you look at a map of the United States at night, you can quickly see the density. About 70% of the population is along the eastern seaboard. And you're right. They have. There's actually a thing you can buy for about $40,000. That's a container that has the that will be a platform for a missile, a Saab 3 intermediate.
Sure.
And you can fire that from international waters,
Sure.
200 miles out, and you don't care about accuracy, just
No.
altitude.
Just has to hit somewhere generally.
And
So here you have all they have to have is the will, first of all,
Yep.
and a crude bomb. It
It's-
doesn't have to be sophisticated at all. And they would have the ability very soon to be
Well-
able to put that up, and that could cause unbelievable
in fact,
destruction.
it'd be my opinion that if you had such a thing, the place it would do the most damage is not parking it in a truck down Midtown Manhattan or something.
Oh, yeah, no.
Is simply to launch it at altitude over the eastern seaboard somewhere, and that is a crippling that we would not recover from.
No.
And so that's all detailed in the report on the internet by the Commission, Commission for the Vulnerability of the U.S.
Yeah.
on EMP.
And
So-
they're very aware of that vulnerability. Iran.
Yep. So is the Department. So is DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, because it's number one on our list of threats.
Wow.
But we don't have enough Aegis destroyers nor whatever to provide a shield.
It would certainly fit within the last days pattern of prophecy, wouldn't it?
It sure would be. And so, what do you do to prepare for it? If you're you gotta
At all costs, keep them from getting it, no matter what it cost.
But what do you, as just a citizen in America, what do you do?
I don't know, because you would have to have, you spoke of New Zealand having the ability to make electricity from geothermal energy.
Oh yeah, well
It's the most available natural commodity that would be needed, and they could do that. But we don't have such things here in the United States.
well, just being outside the hemisphere would be a protection in that
Yeah.
sense. In that sense, but it's disturbing to realize that Obama, the current administration. Yes, the other thing, Hal, when I go by a military cemetery, I'm reminded that it's filled with bodies of patriots who died fighting everything that our current administration is embracing. I mean, it wasn't democracy that we sent the guys to war for. It was liberty and freedom,
Yes.
and that's been lost in the discussion.
Yes.
Somehow democracy is heralded as a target. No, our founders worked hard to avoid a democracy because they knew it was unstable. But the insanity that's going on is just frustrating, painful. I call it a painful blessing. It sounds like an oxymoron. It's the puncturing of a delusion. I feel like a small child and he discovers there's no Santa Claus. That's important that he knows that, but it's painful. You know,
Yes, it
I
is.
think and I think the Israelis, there was a day it took them a while to realize that their adversaries don't want peace, and that's caused an awakening some years ago in general, I think, in Israel. But it really disturbs me to see the America that we signed up for, and I say that in a very personal, deep sense. It's gone.
Yeah.
It's over. And the NDAA, the National Defense Authority thing, obliterating the Bill of Rights. Most Americans have no grasp, but there is no guarantee of trial by jury. All the Bill of Rights are nullified. And people look at you blankly like you're some kind of nut when you point that out. It's the first time in history that I'm on the same side of the American Civil Liberties Union.
Yeah, right.
Because they are doing the screaming,
They are screaming.
and I agree with them on that. But people are they're one of two kinds. They either don't know that, or they're frightened because they know it exists. It's sort of that kind of a thing. So,
Well, you know, buddy, it's been, I was just thinking how long we've known each other. 1972, I first met you, and that counts up to be somewhere around 43 years.
that's
And
Well-
it's a long time.
well, something that if I can pick up the initiative here for a minute. Most people know we're old friends.
Yeah.
What most people may not know is that you're the reason, personally, you're the reason why I went into full-time ministry. I have very vivid memories of that. where you came and grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and encouraged me to make my hobby my profession, and causing a whole change in my life. And it was through your encouragement and sponsorship and protections that caused me to go down that path. What you may not be up to speed on, we formed a thing called Koinonia House, the
Yes.
publisher.
Yes.
But we also, about 8 years ago now, 7, 8 years ago, created a think tank.
Mm-hmm.
As I reflected on my history, I realized there was a segment in my background, almost everything had relevant in my ministry, but I had spent time in the think tank world.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized there wasn't a think tank for Christians. And I thought, well, we organize one,
Mm-hmm.
make it voluntary. So we created an entity called the Koinonia Institute. Now,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things when we first formed the think tank,
Mm-hmm.
I set aside some honorary gold medallions because I always assumed somewhere along the way we would be finding each other on the same speaking platform.
Uh-huh.
And because, for some weird reason, we just have never crossed paths at a time when I wanted us to cross paths. And so I always planned to embarrass you with a presentation
My goodness.
of our gold medallion. We have the now we see through in the Greek, see through glass darkly, then face to face.
Mm-hmm.
That's our emblem. But then we also surround it with the great commandment in Hebrew
Mm-hmm.
on the outside. But anyway,
It's beautiful.
if you would accept that
Oh,
as an
I-
honorary member
I'm
of our
greatly,
think tank.
I'm greatly honored.
So I just wanted to spring on.
I'm
I was
greatly
going to
honored.
embarrass you in front of an audience sometime, but I'd rather than have time is slipping by for both of us.
Yeah, I'm greatly honored. I'll tell you, that's beautiful.
So that's our little gesture there.
Well, I love you, brother.
I love you too,
And
my
this has
friend.
been.
As I've told many of
we
my
need
friends,
to be
I'll even back you when
together.
you're wrong.
well,
it
goes both ways.
You're a friend, yeah, you betcha. No,
Well-
that friend, I've had the privilege of being really tutored by Walter Martin, Chuck Smith, but you're the guy that really the Lord used to recruit me into the full-time mission. I've never forgotten that. And
Praise the Lord. Praise the
I
Lord,
praise
brother.
that. So it's just been a delight to be reconnected with you here and,
Well, I
and
pray
plot
that-
and scheme together
Yeah,
here.
we will be plotting and scheming again, I'm sure. You've been listening to my dear friend Chuck Missler, and he's had an extraordinary ministry. He usually has unusual things that he does, but they're all effective. So I'm very grateful
Thank you, my friend.
to have you.
Thank you.
God bless you. And God willing, we'll see you later.